Hello, noble ones. Welcome back to the podcast, Raw Talk, Real Stories. And this week is a juicy topic. It's called toxic teachers. And when I say toxic teachers, I'm talking about emotional teachers. A lot of this happens through our relationships. They don't always start out toxic, but they can end in toxic ways. And I think it's just important to point back to the emotions that get toxic when relationships change. And in this podcast, I want to give you an invitation to look at some things differently and how toxic relationships can actually help our evolution and help us grow. So I'm going to give you 10 positive things to take away from the toxic teachers in our life. But first, I want to welcome everybody back and just thank you so much for following along on the journey. If you're here for the first time, welcome. I'm Kristen. I'm a emotion coach and I'm the owner of Noble One. And it is my mission to really help people understand their feelings and be able to process through emotionally challenging times. And, I had my own healing journey with depression and struggling with emotions, and I didn't even really know it until a lot later in life. So as I learned a lot, I kind of, found my purpose and passion and mission, and that's to help other people. So here we are. And it's amazing too, to me, you guys, how like on a daily basis, I just come up against challenging emotions, and it happens through just, interactions with other people, what we're doing throughout our day, just life. And so it's been crazy to kind of start this podcast and where it's gone, and the things that I've talked about aren't exactly what I thought I would in the first place. So just thanks for being patient and being here and allowing me to be just open and vulnerable. And let's get into it. So I want to start out by saying, our relationships with other people, our first relationships are obviously with family, and then as we start to grow, we form friendships and then coworkers. And then eventually we get into, loving relationships, husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends. But all of these relationships are some of our greatest teachers. And, our interactions with other people, this is how we can learn more about ourselves. It's data, it's information, I guess. And I want to say too that I don't think that relationships, or people in general start out toxic. You attract certain people into your life for a reason. And it's usually, that old cliche, like a reason, a season, or a lifetime. I truly believe that. We attract these people based on kind of either what we need to learn or we're resonating with them at the time. There's something that brought us together. But what happens, I think, is it can turn toxic because there's a breakdown of things in the relationship. Whenever you go into a relationship, it's usually that best foot forward, right? You haven't really gotten to a deeper level. You haven't gotten to know someone fully. And I think they say it could take up to 6 months to get to know somebody. And I'm not talking family, obviously, but like friendships or love relationships, it can take up to 6 months to truly get to know somebody. So you go in and you've got your best foot forward and you're getting to know somebody. And it's not until later that I think things start to come out. And those toxic traits, and I'm using the word toxic just because it's something that we all know, negative, toxic, whatever you want to call it, but they stem from trauma, right? In our early childhood, we all have these patterns of emotions and ways that we cope with things that we've brought with us or that we're bringing with us through our life based on kind of what we've learned along the way. So you've got your earlyhood traumas, things that can get triggered like, abandonment, rejection, unworthiness, whatever that lens is that you're looking through based on how you grew up and based on your experiences of what you've gone through up until that point that you enter into a relationship. And then what happens also is communication breaks down. You may not know at the beginning of a relationship, but some of the skills that, you have around communication, around, how you handle conflict if you have emotional awareness, right? If you're connected to yourself, first and foremost, that obviously is going to allow you to understand and have more compassion for someone else, or a wider perspective, I guess. And so relationships will start to erode, and then toxic traits or negative traits start to come out, and then you start to build up this resentment, I guess, right? If you don't have communication skills, you're going to keep it in, have expectations of people that you're not communicating. Maybe you don't like to change. You're inflexible, and maybe your partner or your friend has been great for a period of time, and then they started to change and you don't like it, or you don't know how to adapt to that. Or maybe it's like one person in the relationship started to grow, or they're more prone to self-development and personal growth, where the other person wants to kind of just stay the same. And that's really common. It has been really common theme in my relationships in the past is I like to grow. I like to expand. I like to learn new things. I like adventure. I like to stretch my brain. I like knowledge. I like reading. And not all my partners did. And so I also have more of I don't know, a level of depth about me and in conversation and whatever. I like to go below the surface. And some people just aren't comfortable with that, but it can end up causing a rift in relationships, which it certainly did in mine. And I felt like I wasn't understood, or I wasn't accepted for who I was. And I was even called like too much, complicated, difficult, right? And then I didn't know how to handle those words. Those were hurtful to me. So then I built up resentment. So, those are all just examples of what happens. And I think, I also want to point out that it's like we all have toxic traits. I think, I don't think anybody comes into the world going, I'm just going to be an asshole and treat people shitty. And it really is, I think some people don't even realize that you hear the word narcissist thrown around a lot, and all the different variations of narcissistic behaviors. And I truly feel that those tendencies, those are some of the most hurt people, the most wounded people, that have all these ways that they try to manipulate and control and kind of hide that true hurt that's inside of them. And so then you've got and I'm just using these terms because I think people are familiar with them. The narcissist will attract a codependent person, and you play out these roles in your relationships where one person is always trying to please the other person to get something from them. And then that person, if they shut down or they ghost or they do any of these behaviors, it sends the other person reeling. And so there's just all these different dynamics that can be toxic. So yeah, I want to list a couple things that I think, are when you want to start noticing if your relationships are turning toxic, or if there's some, I don't know, like emotional manipulation and, almost emotional, I don't want to say abuse, but it's just treatment where you might be doing it or someone else might be doing it to you. And I wrote these down because I think sometimes we don't recognize them, but what we need to do is realize that this might be an opportunity for us to really evaluate where we're at in these relationships. So one is when people are really critical or judgmental towards you. They're just not really accepting of who you are, everything that you say. They seem to have a comment about. They ignore your boundaries. That's another one. So you set up a boundary and, this is what I need, or this is what I'll tolerate, or what I won't tolerate, and they don't listen to you. That could be another one. People that are possessive of you or controlling, they want to make sure that it's almost like they don't want you to grow. They want you to stay in that little box that they're used to seeing you in. And then if you start to grow and change, it makes them uncomfortable. So they grip on tighter. And that's kind of an element of control. Another really big one is they dismiss your feelings. So when you say, hey, that really upset me, that made me sad, or I felt angry after that, or you share your feelings over and over again, and they just it's almost like they can't remember, goes in one ear, out the other. There's just no, I guess, emotional capacity to receive your feelings, hear your feelings, and then most importantly, have enough emotional awareness to know that the next time that situation comes up, oh, that's right. That's how that made her feel. Or I remember when I did that, that made him feel this way. So I'm going to be cautious about that the next. Silent treatment and ghosting. This is a big one I hear about a lot. Is that's just when someone literally they just shut down because they don't know how to handle it. They don't have the communication skills, or they want to punish you. You know, if I don't talk to this person, if I give them the silent treatment, then, then they'll either come more towards me, which is that, like, they'll come back and cling on to me. It's that push pull in a relationship. And then the ghosting is just, oh God, it's just, honestly, it's just rude. Like, I don't understand it, but a lot of people use it as a tactic to just disappear. I don't want to address this. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Or I'm going to use it, as a manipulative tactic. And then the push and pull, you see this a lot in relationships where, it's funny now, you guys, is like all these relationships are through texting. Gosh, everything's done digitally. And so the communication in my mind is already skewed because there's no fluctuation in what you're trying to say, or someone might read the words wrong and take it the wrong way. But we use this like push pull tactic where, let's say, you're texting with someone and you can tell there's something going on. We'll send text messages to try to get a response or a reaction, right? So I always say, like, what's your intention behind the communication that you're either trying to get from someone or that you're sending to someone? I think it's really important to notice if there's a push-pull dynamic going on in a relationship. It could be on the edge of toxic. And then there's the passive aggression where, oh my gosh, people, it's like they're trying to sabotage the relationship. So they're pushing the blame onto you, or they're trying to find reasons to pick fights. Or self-sabotaging themselves, or sometimes they'll use sarcasm. Sarcasm will be like to kind of downplay when you're trying to connect emotionally, or you're trying to express something. They'll make a joke out of it because it makes them so uncomfortable. And then finally, this is another sign, is when, let's say, a relationship's kind of growing apart, and then they start to involve other people. Well, I talked to Bob, and Bob said that he thinks you're being ridiculous. Or, I called my mother, and my mother said she brought up the time you did this or that. So they bring other people in to try to back up their opinion. So if any of those things are present in your relationships, it may be time to just kind of reevaluate if this is turning toxic. And, if it is, and you have a person in your life, either a friendship that has the ability to talk through it, or you're in a marriage or boyfriend-girlfriend situation where they can come beside you and actually grow with you, that's one thing. But if you have tried to communicate endlessly and they don't hear you, they don't accept it, they're not willing to kind of receive what you're saying, then you may have to consider going a different direction. And then the final thing I do want to say, that if someone's gaslighting you, that's another thing to be really aware of. And that is a toxic behavior. And it's super manipulative, and it's super damaging to people that are empathic and sensitive. And gaslighting is like when somebody twists things around and they shove it back at you, and they literally make you think it's your fault. They make you feel like you're crazy, and they're so convincing in the way that they do it that you're just filled with all this like self-doubt and guilt and shame, because everything that you do, they somehow turn it back around on you, and you think your reality is like skewed. So if someone is gaslighting you, absolutely, I would say exit left. So now let's go towards, what is this all about? So what can we use the fallout of relationships or friendships, or when things turn toxic? what's the benefit of it? I think there's huge gifts in it. And if I think back on all of my relationships and most my like loving relationships, I'd say with boyfriends and things like that have been the biggest gifts of my life because I've had all this trauma around unworthiness and not being lovable, not being good enough. And I think I've talked about it at length, perfectionism. And so having a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband situation, these types of partnerships will really, really, really bring all of that up to the surface so that you can look at the patterns and see what you're doing. So let's go through what I call invitations to your evolution. So you take what you've learned or what you are learning in these toxic situations or behaviors and you use it for your good. And I could have kept writing these, but I'm like, okay, here's 10 that really make sense to me. So number 1, personal growth. When you're in a relationship like this, you can sit there and think about, okay, where am I playing small? Where am I not showing up for myself? Where am I abandoning myself in this relationship so that I can make sure that they're happy or that I'm trying to please them? So where are you playing small? What is that pattern and where did it come from that you learned that your needs don't come first and you have to take a back seat? So you can use what you learn in toxic relationships for personal growth. Okay. Number 2 is courage. It's a way for us to finally go, you know what? I've had it. I can't take this anymore. And I'm going to stand up for myself and I'm either going to use my voice or I'm going to exit the relationship. So every time you leave a relationship or a friendship like that, you're building up courage around who you are, what you can tolerate, what your boundaries are. And that's huge. That's a positive thing. Number 3 is ownership. Look, I had to look in the mirror and say, what am I doing to contaminate or contribute to relationships? So when I had my major just life fall apart back in 2017, that was one of the things that I really did is I had to sit there and realize how much I had projected outward onto other people and that I'll be happy when, and if they do this, then I'd be happy. And I really had to come back to myself and say, how did I contribute to the contamination of that marriage, right? Because it was so painful for me. And, it's not always one person's fault. It can be, but like I said at the beginning, we all have these toxic or negative emotional patterns that are sometimes buried subconsciously, and we're just using them to cope, to manage, to try to get our needs met, to fulfill our ego. There's many reasons why we do it, but the biggest part is ownership. You've got to absolutely own what your emotions are, what your feelings are, what you're doing in the relationship. And that's a huge opportunity or an invitation to evolve. The 4th one is setting boundaries. You hear about this all the time. There's many, many books, many, many teachers on boundaries, but a boundary is just like, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. And I think we all have the ability to change our boundaries, and it's just that communicating, you know what, I've allowed this for a long time, but it doesn't feel good to me anymore. So going forward, I would like it to be like this. Or if someone crosses a boundary with you, it's just that kind of agreeing to disagree. But it's an opportunity for you to establish new ones. In my case, I didn't have any. Literally, I just let people walk all over me, total people pleaser, didn't use my voice. And I would say this is one area where I'm still growing. Like, I think I'm really good at it sometimes, but I've recently been in some situations where I felt myself in the conversation, not shutting down. I was still taking in what was happening, but I didn't speak in that moment what I felt. And it always happens in hindsight. I will go and sit with it for a while. I'm like, God, I can't believe I didn't say this or that. Oh, I should have said. That's us not using our voice. So it's an ability for us to set boundaries and start practicing that. Number 5 is you get to start changing these patterns of behavior. So think about, I always say like, oh, it's the same person in a different meat suit. And it really is. Like, if you look back at relationships as you're growing and learning, a lot of times the breakups or the fallouts, some of the patterns are there. It's the same reasons, right? So you keep attracting people to help you break these patterns. So when you leave a toxic relationship, you do have the ability to change the patterns, or at least recognize them and start to dig in, get curious about what it is again that, why do I keep playing out that pattern? Where did that come from? Oh, well, it's like how I saw my dad treat my mom. And so I'm doing that too. So noticing patterns and starting to change them. Number 6 is shifting perspectives, right? It'll allow you to see things from another person's point of view. So what's happened to me over time is, instead of that, like, because I wasn't processing my emotions, whenever I would feel someone attacking me, or there was conflict, or there was a disagreement, I would take it really personally. And sometimes I still catch myself doing that, but I'm a lot better about it, where very quickly, even if I feel attacked, or actually even if I am attacked, I'm allowed to have a wider perspective now and look at someone and say, gosh, I know why they're being that way. They're coming from a wounded place. They're protecting themselves. They're doing all the things that I'm doing too, but just in a different way, right? So we all have this lens that we look through that's filled with the filters of what's happened to us up until that point. So when we get into conflict, we're only looking at the other person through that filter. So it allows us, when we're in these relationships, to open up our perspective and say, oh, okay, I can see it from their point of view. I don't agree maybe, but I know why they're hurt. I know why they're coming at me that way. And then number 7 is, it's an opportunity for us to expand our consciousness. And what that means is, when you let the subconscious or unconscious programs and trauma that have been running and in these patterns come up, and they come up through when relationships turn toxic. Once you kind of heal them and process them, that expands your consciousness. So you're making the unconscious and the subconscious conscious, if that makes sense. Like you're digging down into the roots, and you're loosening all of that so that it can be cleared away for new things to start growing. Number 8 is healing. I mean, come on, like, every time we go through a difficult relationship, whether it's a breakup, the end of a friendship, growing apart from someone, loss of someone, it's an opportunity to heal. And this is where that's a choice too, right? We can remain bitter, we can remain in blame, or we can actually start to heal ourselves. And I can say that's not the easy road, but it's the right road, you guys, because I went for years just like holding so much in that was hurt, and trying to move on with my life. And even though I did, and I entered into new relationships, I was still carrying the hurt from the past. And so when you do that, you're essentially, think about it like this. You have this suitcase, right? And if you take all your hurt emotions from the last relationship and you put it all in this suitcase and you take it into the next relationship, what do you think is going to happen? So you've got to give yourself time to heal and commit to your healing, commit to your growth. And that's going to look different for everybody. But work on your self-development, work on self-love, self-acceptance, find people that can help you, whether that's a counselor or a therapist or an energy healer, or there's so many different ways that healing can look for people, but it's whatever is going to help you to grow and evolve. Number 9 is just, it's liberation, you guys. It's freedom. When you walk away from a toxic situation, yeah, it can hurt, but at the same time, you're freeing yourself from the negativity that surrounds it. And it doesn't mean that that person was bad or that you were bad. It just means that you grew up until the only point that you could. And now it's time to go a different direction. Do you guys remember way back? Some of you probably don't, but when I think it was Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris, what the guys, I can't remember his last name, the singer, and they announced, and it was, in the media about conscious uncoupling. And I was like, what the hell is that? Like, I think everybody was kind of making fun of it, but now it does not make so much sense. Can we just be conscious? Like, wow, I love you. And we grew together up until this point. And now, like, we've tried to work through these things, but the relationship has become toxic. And now I want to be free. I want to be free of that. I want to go a different direction and grow. And that freedom it's liberation. And so that brings me to the number 10, which is what Noble One is all about, is helping people walk this path to emotional freedom. And to me, my definition of emotional freedom is when you finally get to the point where you can accept it all, right? You're taking ownership. Like, this is how I feel, or I'm having feelings, or I'm allowed to feel. And then you are able to process difficult emotional challenges, but you don't stay stuck in it anymore. You're free. You're free to have that experience and then move on. And then you also have this beautiful opportunity to choose differently the next time. That's what freedom is, right? We all want the freedom to choose to live the life that we want to live. So we all have the freedom to choose how we want to feel. That's emotional freedom. So those are the top 10 things that I think are really, really important to flip it to a positive when you're going through a toxic teaching situation, typically in the form of a relationship. It could be, a job that you don't like. It could be a situation that you're stuck in. But I think our biggest toxic emotional teachers are through our relationships. So let's review them one more time in case you guys want to write these down, because these are the positives. If you're experiencing toxic relationships or situations right now, look at these opportunities to grow and evolve as an invitation for you to step on that path to emotional freedom. Personal growth, courage, taking ownership, setting boundaries, changing old patterns, shifting perspective, expanding your consciousness, healing, liberating yourself, and emotional freedom. Yes. So I hope this helps you guys understand that, it just is like, we're going to have people in our life that are going to teach us things. And although it feels bad, it can be good. And you can use it for your growth. You can use it for your evolution. You can use it to gain more emotional awareness. And that's what we're all about here at Noble One. That's what we love to talk about. I hope this inspires you, helps you, and I look forward to connecting with you guys next time. Before you go, like the podcast, subscribe, share this with your friends, leave a comment, and until then, be noble. I love you so much.